Well, just when you thought that CNN could say everything they could possibly say about President Trump, there's this. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, I was tuned into CNN's news this morning when they had breaking news about the impact of Donald Trump's presidency, and it's this. The Labor Department reports 266,000 new jobs in November, beating expectations of 180,000, and some 158.6 million Americans are employed now, which is a sixth record month in a row. Unemployment at 3.5% is at a 50-year low. Bill, now I know that you're going to say this is fake news because it came from CNN.
Well, I think what it really is more than anything is the most powerful evidence yet presented to have Donald Trump impeached and removed immediately from office. And the reason that has to happen is because if Americans continue to find work and jobs and take home their own paychecks instead of depending on government largesse, two things will happen, both of them fatal to the progressives. One of them is they'll start worrying about having some of their money back. It's really before it was taken away from them by high taxes. But I think much more fatal to progressivism would be that they would be happy.
Bill, as we go into an election year, I'm wondering whether the Democrats are miscalculating about what Americans prioritize. And I know you'll say they miscalculate on everything, but specifically on the miscalculation that Americans are political junkies like the Democrat pundits are, like the politicians are, frankly, like we are, and that most Americans don't look at anything but like what I saw this weekend. The store where I work had its biggest Black Friday sale in its history. And that kind of thing hits the bottom line where the news may just glance off people's foreheads and keep going. How can Democrats, who seem to care so much about focus groups and polling, miss such a fundamental factor in elections?
I don't think they miss it, Scott. I just think there's nothing they can do about it. So it's not so much that they're unaware of it, so as much as they're sweeping it under the rug because they have no answer for it. I mean, the reason I'm so optimistic about 2020, although don't get cocky, kid, is because that 2016 win of Donald Trump was based on 3 or 4 blue-collar Rust Belt states going to Donald Trump by thin margins. When he was a complete unknown, the economy was in the toilet, and Hillary Clinton had all the momentum and so on from 30 years worth of being was it the Queen Witch of War, or the Goddess of War, whatever she was?
The Queen of Warmongers.
Queen of Warmongers.
Thank you, Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you, Tulsi Gabbard. So now the Democrats have to ask themselves, are they going to do better or worse among those blue-collar workers that have traditionally been the center of the Democratic Party after 4 years of record low unemployment and record high per capita family income gains? Everybody always says it's the economy, stupid, and that when things are in tough times, people feel it. The economy is felt more than war. It's felt more than political. The economy is essentially everything is kind of follows the economy. If the economy is doing well, people are employed. They're bringing in enough money. They tend not to worry so much. They tend not to panic so much. They tend to be more willing to give things time and less likely to hear the siren song of progressivism, especially socialism, that needs to save us from this catastrophe. The less of a catastrophe it is, the weaker that siren song becomes. And this is the thing that I don't see how they can possibly recover. I think the conflicted nature of the Democratic Party, and conflicted is a kind word for it, it's basically, in my opinion, a no-win situation where they have to have these blue-collar workers who are now working in record numbers, and they're not unaware of why this happened. Even Barack Obama, who said you could not push a button to make prosperity happen, turns out you could. And we'd been saying so all along. We even labeled the button for him, but he just refused to press it. No matter how fond you may have been of Barack Obama personally as president, if you spent the 8 years of his administration just with the wolves at the door or worse on government subsidies or out of work for long periods of time, that's what your memory will be of Democratic administrations. And when conversely, a Republican comes into office and in the first 6, 7, 8 months starts to uncoil this enormous pent up power in the economy after 8 years of sabotage and duplicity, how are they going to fight against that? They have no way to fight against it, which is why all of this is about Donald Trump personally. That's why I think the impeachment nonsense, which everybody knows is nonsense, is the Hail Mary that the Democrats are throwing because they've got nothing else. Since we can't attack the man's record, it's a spectacular record.
Bill,
if we can't attack his record, we have to attack him.
A couple of the more telling statistics in this report that came out is that an extraordinary increase in employment in the leisure industry. And, just sort of like live childbirths and child survival is an indicator of poverty in countries across the world. You get an idea of what kind of society they have. The idea that more Americans are employed in leisure, I think, is a fascinating stat. In addition, while they didn't change, Black unemployment remains at 5.5% and Hispanic unemployment at 4.2%. Is this kind of Bureau of Labor Statistics information more effective than anything the president can say when it comes to winning Black and Latino votes?
No, it is not. And
he still needs to say some things.
You better believe it.
What does he need to say?
Well, first of all, let's understand that the same argument, needless to say, applies to Blacks and Hispanics, who, like all the rest of us, are individuals as well. That's why we are conservatives, because we're individualists. But they are doing well as well. It's not like the white middle class is pulling away or the rich are pulling away. Everybody's doing well. So the same arguments that apply to those blue-collar workers in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania and so on apply to Blacks and Hispanics as well. But many of the Democratic voters in the Rust Belt states that we talked about are, in fact, white males or white families in any event, white Christian families who've been demonized by the Democratic Party at every turn. They have a lot more willingness to change sides because, number one, they've been attacked by their own party, and number two, they understand that these charges of racism and all the rest of it are baseless against them. It might be baseless against Trump too. But with Blacks and Hispanics, the message from the Democrats and the media and the movies, which is all the same thing, from the left, has been so pervasive for so long that you often see, in fact, I see this all the time online, people who saying, I just hate the Democrats. I hate what they're doing. I hate everything about them, but I just never could vote for a Republican. That's what we're up against now. And all it takes to shatter that is a simple effort on the part of the candidate. But as we've discussed on this show before, that effort has to be sincere. It can be loud, brassy, it can even be bombastic, but it's got to be sincere. And I think having watched, as I mentioned before also, having edited a movie talk show and watching these white liberals deal with Blacks and Hispanics and watching the kid gloves and I don't want to hurt your feelings. It's demeaning and it's annoying.
Bill, there's another interesting stat here, by the way. They go back, every time they release a new report, they go back and reevaluate the numbers they had for the previous several months. September's job numbers have been revised upward by 13,000. October's job numbers were revised upward by 28,000. So in effect, September and October, an upward revision of 41,000. In other words, things were better in September and October than the government told us. They're better now than anybody expected. I guess I'm wondering if I'm Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, I almost said Kamala Harris, she's gone, but Pete Buttigieg or any of these people, how do you run against this economic juggernaut and not look ridiculous?
I don't think you can. But the only chance you have is to increase the level of distaste for the person so high that they will not vote for Donald Trump or be willing to vote for his opponent based on personal revulsion. And that's the strategy that we see now. It's a strategy that we've always seen from the beginning with respect to Donald Trump. There hasn't been a moment since he was elected, and I mean midnight on Tuesday night in 2016 in November. From that moment on, he's been portrayed as a lech, as a lunatic, as a guy who's out of control. The White House is
way
teetering.
Before that, Bill. Let's be honest.
But they didn't expect him to win. And when he did win, this had to be put in place. And when the economic news came in and his successes economically began to come in, as well as overseas and so on, then they began to realize this is really all we've got. And I have to tell you, I think that they have passed the maximum amount of damage that they could do to Donald Trump quite a while ago. I think now everything that they do to him helps him in terms of net support. I would like to go back to one thing I didn't get a chance to get to on account of me being so long-winded. That is, what should Donald Trump say to Hispanics and blacks? First of all, he shouldn't think of them as Hispanics and blacks, and I suspect he won't. But if he is as smart as I think he is and savvy as I think he is, and as we have done in previous shows, apparently as he's planning on doing, Donald Trump will find himself, as the campaign really begins, in any number of Southern black churches or whatever. And I think all he has to do is ask the perennial question that presidential candidates ask. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? That was Ronald Reagan's ticket to success. And Donald Trump can ask that question in whatever style he chooses. But if you're with the kind of numbers you're talking, it's not an incrementally better economy. It's an enormously better economy. And it's especially enormously better for Hispanics and blacks, which constitute the core of the Democratic Party's solid vote. Since the Democratic Party is already throwing away blue-collar workers with things like the Green New Deal and all these other high-tax things that are going to put people out of work, and workers know that. They're not idiots. They think they're idiots, but they're not. So they've already basically thrown those voters away. Now, they haven't thrown away blacks and Hispanics. On the contrary, they're courting assiduously, but Donald Trump can peel these away because he can just say, hey, look, man, scoreboard, right? You can talk all you want to. There's the scoreboard.
That's right. And it occurs to me that even if you concede, as some, people on the right who oppose President Trump, and obviously almost all the left, you could concede that the guy is a lecher, a lunatic, and a liar, but a jobs machine, and he gets reelected, does he not?
Yes. And I would like to state for the record that I don't consider him to be a lecher, a lunatic, or a liar. And Scott doesn't either. But that's putting it into the starkest possible terms. And look, and it's not an unfair characterization. It's a severe characterization, but essentially the essence of it is accurate to the degree that most of Donald Trump's supporters don't think he's a lunatic or a liar, and especially not the lunatic part. But I think everybody who voted for him on some level or another understood that this was not an election for Pope, that this was an election for somebody who could overcome almost overwhelming inertia and powerful societal forces that have been conspiring to take the American people's government away from them for quite a long time now and succeeding at it spectacularly. And so I think that the Democrats are consistently, and I think that this impeachment goat rodeo is another example of how badly out of tune they are. I think the Democrats still think, after almost 4 years of the guy, well, three full years and a half, they think that they think that if people only realize he's as bad as they know him to be, then they'll change their mind. And the 2.5 years, by the way, not 3. And the thing that's so shocking about that is that it is so obvious, Scott. It's so superficially obvious that the people who elected Donald Trump and who continue to support him and whose support for him has grown enormously. I've seen it over the last 2.5 years. What the left just cannot comprehend is that we know this. We already know it.
Well, and Bill, that's not the group I'm talking about. And so let me be clear about the question I was asking. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've conceded in the past that President Trump loses none of his base going into the 2020 election. That's not even in question. Right. My question really relates to a group of people in the Republican Party or on the conservative right who didn't think President Trump was conservative or Republican enough, and the group of people on the left or in the middle who found his personality and his just the way he conducts himself to be distasteful. Those people could look at him and say, you know what? I think the guy's a liar. I think he's crazy. I think he's handsy and he's a lecher and he disrespects women and he disrespects Latinos.
And I'm $5,000 richer than I was.
Look at my paycheck, and I got to go privately into that ballot box, into that voting booth, and vote for my own self-interest.
Yes, and I think that's clear. And I don't suspect that there's many people who are on the fence who are now not willing to vote for Trump when they were in 2016. I think by the time we'd had that audio recording and everything else and they played every card they had in 2016, I think all the people who were going to not vote for Trump in 2016 on the basis of his personality, I don't see that number increasing any. I do think that what you say is true, that people can say, God, I can't stand the guy. I really hate him. But I'm $5,000 richer now than I was 2.5 years ago. And under 8 years of Obama, I got $1,000 richer. So there's that. And then the final question really is what happens to the conservatives who don't support Donald Trump, to the never Trumpers on the right, people who's registered as Republican whose votes he didn't get in 2016. I am only speaking anecdotally because I was not one of those people, but I have seen some of Donald Trump's harshest critics from the right constantly extolling his virtues and mostly his accomplishments. They're still critical of him in terms of things that they don't like in terms of his personality and so on, but they have certainly taken a much more conciliatory tone towards him because of things like 2 Supreme Court justices who are clearly conservative, success in eliminating ISIS as a threat, and on and on and on down the line. So let me just put it this way. It's going to be a lot harder to be a Republican never-Trumper in 2020 than it was in 2016.
And Bill,
because there's evidence on the table now.
The way I hear it from the president makes it seem like the president's basically saying, hey, you conservatives, you Republicans who didn't vote for me before, bow before Zod, kneel before Zod. And without saying, hey, how can we reach out to those people? Do you sense anything on the part of the administration, the campaign, or President Trump himself who's saying, hey, maybe we can get those folks back in the tent if we can just make a few modifications in how we present what the party stands for?
Yeah, in other words, could Donald Trump be a little more conciliatory and get some of those votes back? And I think the answer clearly is no. Donald Trump is not a conciliatory guy. I don't think Donald Trump has a conciliatory bone in his body, to be honest with you. I think Donald Trump, and I say this out of a position of respect and almost admiration, even though I find this quality in general not an attractive one. I think that Donald Trump is a guy who never forgets an insult. I think he's a guy who is determined to give better than he took. And that's why he's president, and that's why he is in the terms of Lincoln regarding Grant. He's the indispensable man. He's indispensable. I don't think Donald Trump is going to be taken a knee to never Trumpians. I don't know if he's going to be doing exactly a bow before Zod kind of thing, but he is going to be doing a fair amount of what did I say? What did I tell you? It's the hugest economic growth ever. And he's right. He's right. That's the thing of it. That's the thing of it. And that's the thing that conservative intellectuals, I personally find the terms to be mutually exclusive and have nothing but contempt for the word intellectual. I think intellectualism is intelligence that's been left in the back of the fridge for 6 months. But right-wing intellectuals are going to have a much harder time making the case that this guy is going to destroy our country after the on-the-table results, both in terms of the economy, in terms of as I said, ISIS, all the foreign policy things, and especially in terms of not just the Supreme Court, but all of the federal court judges. Everybody talks about the Supreme Court. We got 2 guys on the court. Donald Trump's replaced, I don't know what the number is, something like 30 or 40% of the total. I think I
heard it was 47%.
Yeah, of the total number of judges on the bench, in the federal bench. That's a sea change, and another 4 years to change a great deal of the others. I mean, the left has governed by the courts because people don't vote for what the left wants. When they come out and say what they want, people don't want it. So you get things like Obamacare rammed down our throats with no Republican votes and so on, and they have to rule through the courts. And they have been working on the courts for 60 years now. And if Donald Trump in one fell swoop, meaning 1 8-year term, can come in and undo all of that work, and or if he can peel away significant numbers of blacks and Hispanic votes from their traditional ties to the Democratic Party, then it's over for the Democrats as we see them today. I'm never one of these guys. I remember when Obama was elected in 2008, we won't see a Republican in office for 40 years. Well, it turns out that they were wrong by 38 years. But I think that this path that the Democrats are on now is a dead end, and I think a number of them recognize that. I can't help but think that now I haven't really given it much thought in this way before, Scott. But you could, we've done a number of shows on Biden support. Just did one this last right angle set, and it seems incredible that he could be getting this kind of support. And I'm beginning to think that the Democratic Party support for Donald Trump, for Joe Biden, is not in the expectation that he can win. I think it's in the expectation that support for Biden means they're going to stop the Democratic Party's just reckless drive off the exit stage left. And I think you get guys like Buttigieg and a few others who are marking out that center position very carefully. But Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, these people are unelectable. And anybody can tell you that they're unelectable. There's no question that they're unelectable. You're not going to be a blue-collar worker who maybe had his job come back from China because of Donald Trump's actions on tariffs or whatever you may think of those, and then decide he's going to vote for a college professor woman who says, I'm going to go get me a beer. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So they're in real trouble. And I think the reason that they're in fatal trouble is because I don't think the strategy of personally tarring Donald Trump is going to gain them any more leverage. All that low-hanging fruit has been plucked, and now all they're doing is just thrashing the ground, wasting time, making it clear that they don't have an agenda, and most importantly, firing up Donald Trump's base with a red-hot anger that will, I think, express itself on the first Tuesday in November of 2020.
And I think you're trivializing what Elizabeth Warren said. I believe she said, I have a policy proposal to get me a beer. So we want to make it clear. She's all about policy proposals. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we are...
Liz has a plan for that. Liz Warren has a plan for going to get me a beer.
That's right.
Oh, my God.
Ladies and gentlemen, more and more people are listening to the Bill Whittle Network podcast. More people are now able to see us. Actually, some people are now able to see us on Fire TV. Listen to our podcast through your Amazon device by saying, Alexa, play Bill Whittle Network app on TuneIn Radio, or Bill Whittle Network on TuneIn Radio. People can see us and hear us in more and more places, and that is being made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who contribute on a monthly or annual basis to fund this enterprise, as well as from our friends over at the Patriot Post, America's News Digest, who have contributed as well over these last several months in a co-promotional effort with us. We'll provide a link to the Patriot Post in the description below. Oh, and by the way, we have some friends over at Patreon who've been consistently and faithfully contributing to Bill Whittle, and now we have finally awoken and taken notice of them. And
I like to call them the Lost Tribe, Scotty.
That's right. We have rediscovered the Lost Tribe who never lost faith. And so if you go to patreon.com/Bill Whittle, you can make a one-time contribution there, or you can make a recurring contribution, perhaps not at the level of membership at Bill Whittle, but what you're able to do. And so that gives you an option to do that. We're grateful for all of that support. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this possible.